December 12th, 1944, Krakow, Poland. The city no longer looked like a city. It was a lifeless body. Empty streets were covered in ash and shattered stone, and buildings, torn open by bombs and fire, stood like skeletons beneath a heavy gray sky. There were no civilians, no signs of life. Only German patrols organizing the final retreat and demolition teams, placing explosives in what little still remained standing. The Soviet army was about 30 kilometers to the east. Everyone knew it. The war was lost. It was a matter of weeks, perhaps days. In that landscape of total destruction, Officer Martin Köhler ran through the ruins, chasing a ghost, a German deserter, soldier Lucas Brandt, 23 years old. He had abandoned his post the night before. Köhler had clear orders. Find him. Alive or dead, dead was preferable. He would serve as an example, a warning to soldiers who were beginning to think about running. Turning a corner, his boots shattered the silence. In front of him stood a half-collapsed apartment building, 3 walls still upright, the roof caved in at the center. Köhler thought he saw movement in a second-floor window. He climbed the stairs with his pistol raised. Every step creaked. Upstairs there was only rubble and a thick, suffocating silence. Brandt wasn't there. He had escaped. Köhler went back down, frustrated. He was about to report the failure when he heard something that didn't belong. A violin. It wasn't his imagination. The notes, fragile and trembling, came from somewhere beneath his feet, from the basement. He descended into the darkness, found a rusted metal door, and pushed it open. It screeched like a scream. The music stopped abruptly. Inside, in the dim light, he made out a human figure. A woman, extremely thin, her hair short and filthy, her eyes huge, filled with terror. In her hands, she held a violin. Köhler watched her in silence. He knew immediately who she was. A Jew, hiding, alone, in a city officially emptied of its population. He knew his duty. Report her, arrest her, eliminate her. She did not beg or cry. She simply pressed the violin to her chest and waited for the death she knew was inevitable. But Köhler did something he himself did not understand. He took a step back, closed the door, and climbed the stairs without looking back. He did not report the woman. He reported that Brandt had fled west and that it was impossible to track him through the ruins. His superior, Lieutenant Ernst Vollmer, looked at him with suspicion, but said nothing. That night, Köhler could not sleep. He knew he had committed treason. He knew that if anyone discovered it, he would be shot. He knew he should go back and finish what he had started, but he also knew he had seen too much death, too many trains, too many children, too many faces erased from the world. And that violin, that broken sound in the middle of the disaster, was the only beautiful thing he had heard in years. 2 days later, he returned to the building. This time he carried something hidden beneath his coat. Not food, something more dangerous and more valuable. Blank documents, evacuation papers, official forms stamped with Wehrmacht seals. He opened the basement door. The woman was still there, crouched in the same corner. When she saw him, her body tensed. "I'm not going to hurt you," Köhler said in German. Then he repeated it in clumsy Polish. "I won't hurt you." He set a bag on the floor. Bread, a jar of preserved food. Then he showed her the documents. "In 3 weeks they're evacuating the last Polish workers," he said. "I need your name, a false one, and I need you to memorize a story. Who you are, where you come from, what you did before." The woman didn't answer. She didn't understand why a German soldier would want to help her. You have two options, Köhler continued. Stay here and die when the Soviets arrive, or when this place collapses, or try to leave with the evacuees. It's dangerous, but it's a chance. At last, the woman spoke. Her voice was barely a rough whisper, worn down by months of silence. Why? Köhler had no clear answer, only exhaustion, guilt, and the urgent need to do at least one thing right before everything ended. What's your name? He asked. Maya, she replied. Maya Lewin. Köhler shook his head. You need another name, a Polish one. Maya lowered her gaze and fell silent, thinking. Maya remembered one of the families who had hidden her some time before, the Kowalskis. Anna Kowalska, she said at last. Köhler nodded, took out a pen, and began filling out the forms with care. According to German records, by December 1944, fewer than 20 Jews were still alive in all of Krakow. Maya Lewin was one of them, and Martin Köhler had just decided that she would live. To understand how two enemies ended up trusting one another, you have to look at who they were before the war reshaped them. Maya had been born on March 15, 1917, in the Muranov district of Warsaw. Her father, Samuel Rosenfeld, owned a small tailoring workshop on the ground floor of the building where they lived. He made suits for lawyers, university professors, and doctors. He was a respected craftsman. Her mother, Esther, taught Polish literature to the children of well-off families. Maya had two younger brothers, David, born in 1928, and Jacob in 1931. The family felt more Polish than Jewish. At home, they spoke Polish. They celebrated Hanukkah and Passover, but they also decorated a small Christmas tree so as not to stand out among their neighbors. Samuel read newspapers in Polish. Esther admired the country's romantic poets. Maya grew up convinced that Warsaw belonged to her just as much as it did to any Catholic. From the age of 7, she showed an unusual talent for the violin. It wasn't just technical skill, it was something deeper. When she played, everything else disappeared. Only the music remained. Her mother enrolled her in private lessons, and at 18, against all expectations, she was accepted into the prestigious Warsaw Conservatory. She was the only Jew in her class. Some professors watched her with suspicion. Several classmates ignored her. But when she played, silence fell. Talent does not understand religion. At 23 in 1940, she was already part of small orchestras. She wasn't famous or an international virtuoso, but she was good. Good enough to earn a living giving lessons and playing private recitals. Music wasn't just a profession. It was her identity, her language, her reason for existing. The violin she held had been a gift from her maternal grandfather, Jacob, an Italian instrument from the 19th century with no great monetary value, but the old man's most cherished possession. He gave it to her on the day she graduated from the conservatory, 2 years before he died. With tears in his eyes, he told her, "Music is the only thing no one can take from you. They can take your home, your money, even your name. But if you carry music inside you, you will always be free." How wrong Grandfather Jacob was. On September 1st, 1939, at 4:45 in the morning, German bombs fell on Warsaw. Maya was asleep when she heard the first explosion. She thought it was thunder. Then came the second, the third, the fourth. When she went out into the street with her family, the sky was covered in smoke and the sirens filled everything. The city held out for 28 days. 28 days of constant bombing, of collapsing buildings, of bodies buried under rubble. By the time German tanks entered on October 1st, more than 20,000 civilians were dead. The first months of occupation were deceptive. Life went on, though diminished. Maya's father kept working, with fewer clients. Her mother maintained a few lessons, though more and more families refused to let a Jewish teacher instruct their children. Maya continued playing at private gatherings, but each week brought a new order. And with each order, the world she knew grew a little smaller. In October came the first order. All Jews had to register. In November, they were forbidden to use public transportation. In December, they could no longer walk along several main streets. In January 1940, entry to theaters, cinemas, and parks was banned. In March, changing residence without permission became illegal. And in June came the most visible mark: the mandatory white armband with a blue Star of David. Maya's father put it on with dignity and said he was not ashamed of who he was, though her mother noticed how his hands trembled. In November 1940, the German authorities sealed the ghetto. 380,000 Jews confined to just 3.4 square kilometers, more than 100,000 people per square kilometer. Entire families crammed into a single room, 10 or 12 people sharing one bathroom. Hunger arrived within weeks. The Rosenfeld family was assigned a room on Nowolippi Street, 6 square meters for 5 people. The kitchen was shared with 4 other families, the bathroom with 8. Maya's father stopped working because no one ordered elegant suits anymore. Her mother tried to give clandestine lessons, but almost no one could pay. David and Jacob, 12 and 9 years old, wandered the streets searching for scraps of food. Maya played the violin in clandestine ghetto cafes, small, dark spaces where people gathered to remind themselves that they were still human. She played Chopin, Vivaldi, Mozart, sometimes tangos, sometimes Yiddish songs her grandfather had taught her. She didn't charge money. She was paid in food, a piece of bread, a few potatoes, once half a kilo of flour that made her mother cry. For 2 years, the ghetto was a slow hell. Hunger was constant and painful. Maya watched her mother grow thinner week after week, her brothers age overnight. David became quiet. Jacob stopped playing. Her father spent hours sitting on the only chair, staring at the wall. Diseases spread unchecked: typhus, dysentery, tuberculosis. Every morning carts passed by collecting bodies, sometimes hundreds, piled up on street corners under old newspapers. The cemetery ran out of space and mass graves began to appear. Children suffered the most. Maya saw them every day, 6, 7, 8 years old, with thin legs and swollen bellies. Some begged. Others tried to smuggle food from the Polish side through holes in the wall and were shot when they tried. In July 1942, the mass deportations to Treblinka began. They said it was work in the East, that families would be reunited soon. It was all a lie. The trains went straight to the gas chambers. Maya's family was seized on August 14, 1942, at dawn. There were shouts, boots on staircases, fists pounding on doors. Her father gathered them together and promised they would stay together, but they couldn't. Soldiers dragged them into the street, into the merciless sun, into the thick smell of sweat and fear, toward the Umschlagplatz, where the cattle cars waited. Then a man from the Jewish ghetto police, Marek Konaro, whom Maya had seen in the cafes, grabbed her by the arm and told her she was coming with him. She refused. She wanted to stay with her family. "If you stay, you die," he insisted. Her mother pushed her forward, her voice broken. "Live for us." Conero spoke to a German guard about musicians needed for workshops. The guard made a gesture, and Maya was pulled aside. Her mother screamed her name. Her father tried to come back. David and Jacob were crying. They were beaten and shoved into the car. Maya saw her father fall, get back up under kicks. and saw her family disappear among tightly packed bodies as the doors slammed shut and the train pulled away. She never saw them again. She remained in the ghetto for another 8 months, but she was no longer the same. She played mechanically, ate just enough not to die, slept without dreaming. Every morning she expected to wake from a nightmare, and every morning reality fell on her again. By April 1943, fewer than 60,000 people remained. Those still alive knew there would be no salvation, and that the deportations would continue until no one was left. It was at that point that the young members of the resistance decided they could wait no longer. In the early hours of April 19, 1943, at exactly 2 a.m, the ghetto uprising began. The first German units that tried to enter were met with gunfire and Molotov cocktails. For a few hours, the idea of resistance seemed possible. It was not. The Germans returned with tanks, heavy artillery, and flamethrowers. They set the ghetto on fire building by building, pumped poison gas into the basements, and blew up the bunkers with dynamite. The rebellion held out for 28 days. By May 16th, everything was ash. Of the 60,000 Jews who remained, only a few hundred managed to escape through the sewer tunnels. Maya was one of them. She was taken out on May 2nd. She descended stairways that seemed to lead straight into hell. The tunnel was narrow, low, and completely dark. The water reached her waist, and the air stank of rot. Bodies floated past her. She walked for hours without seeing anything. She carried the violin wrapped above her head to keep it out of the water. She emerged in the Solovors district at around 2 a.m. on May 3rd. When she came out, covered in mud and excrement, the sky above the ghetto was burning with an orange glow. Everything she had known was disappearing. For the next 18 months, she lived in hiding. First with the Kowalski family, then with the Nowaks. Each move was a mortal risk. Every knock on the door could be the Gestapo. When the city uprising broke out in August 1944, she was with the Nowaks. That insurrection lasted 63 days. Between 150,000 and 200,000 civilians died. In the end, the population was evacuated. The Nowaks tried to take her with them, but Maya knew it was impossible. She stayed behind. For 3 months, she survived alone among the ruins. She hid in flooded basements, drank rainwater, and ate forgotten canned food. She lost 20 kilos. Her hair fell out, her teeth loosened, and she developed jaundice. But she never let go of the violin. Sometimes, when she was sure there were no patrols nearby, she played. Not to practice, but to remember that she was still human. In one of those moments, Martin Köhler found her and decided not to kill her. Martin had been born on March 12, 1899, in Celle, Germany. He was the second of 4 brothers in an educated middle-class family. His father, Wilhelm Köhler, taught Latin and Greek at a secondary school. His mother, Margarete, worked at the municipal library. They were practicing Catholics, conservative but not fanatical. Martin grew up surrounded by books. His father believed education led to a better life, that the classics taught eternal virtues, and that an educated man was a civilized man. Martin read Plato in Greek, Cicero in Latin, Goethe, Schiller, and Kant in German. He was a brilliant student. He planned to follow his father's path, become a teacher, and live a quiet life among books and students. Then 1917 came. He was 18 when he was drafted into the First World War. He was sent to the Western Front in February 1918. He spent 8 months in the trenches at Verdun. He saw things no book prepares anyone for. Bodies torn apart by artillery, soldiers drowning in mud, gases that burned the lungs from the inside, men who lost their minds and screamed until someone silenced them with a bullet. The sickly, sweet smell of rotting flesh never went away, not even in sleep. He saw his best friend, Franz Müller, die in his arms. A grenade exploded nearby, and Franz lost both legs. Martin tried to stop the bleeding with his hands, knowing it was useless. Franz took 20 minutes to die. 20 minutes screaming for his mother. When the war ended in November 1918, Martin returned to Celle believing he had seen enough death for an entire lifetime. He studied at the university and graduated in literature and history in 1922. In 1923, he secured a position as a secondary school teacher. He taught German, history, and literature. He was respected, patient, and fair. His students liked him. In 1925, he married Anna Schultz, the daughter of a local pharmacist. It was a solid marriage, built on respect and genuine affection. They had 3 children, Gerda in 1926, Ursula in 1928, and Friedrich in 1931. Martin was a devoted father. He read to them before bed, took them to the park on Sundays, taught them how to ride bicycles, and helped with homework. He hoped they would love books as well. He lived by simple routines and modest happiness. He considered himself fortunate. He was never a fanatical nationalist. When the Nazis came to power in 1933, he watched them with unease. Some colleagues joined the party and began raising their arms in salute. Martin did not, but neither did he protest. When the racial laws arrived in 1935, when Jewish teachers were dismissed and students expelled, he felt uncomfortable. He had had Jewish colleagues, good men. Suddenly they were gone. What could he do? Lose his job? Put his family at risk? He kept silent, like millions of others. In November 1938, during Kristallnacht, he saw the synagogue in Celle burn. He saw firefighters stand by without intervening. He saw neighbors looting Jewish shops and an elderly bookseller, Mr. Goldstein, beaten in the street. Martin stood there and did nothing. That night, he wrote in his diary that he had witnessed something he would never forget, and that his shame was having remained motionless. Even so, he continued not to act. When the war began in September 1939, he was 40 years old and was drafted immediately. He was not sent to the front. He was considered too old. Instead, he was assigned an administrative position in logistics. He was told his work was vital, that he was serving his country from an office. Martin accepted, said goodbye to his wife and children, and headed east. He was posted to Krakow in November 1939. The city had just surrendered. Buildings were still smoldering and streets were littered with rubble. His task was to inventory requisitioned buildings, assess their condition, and decide which would serve as warehouses or offices. At first, he worked without questioning anything. He inspected, filled out forms, and signed orders. He was efficient, meticulous, a bureaucrat in uniform. But that city began to change something inside him. Little by little, without being able to avoid it, he saw the ghetto for the first time in December 1940, barely a month after it had been sealed. The military truck he was riding in moved along Kłodna Street. Martin looked out the window, and there it was. The wall, nearly 3 meters high, topped with barbed wire and shards of glass. Behind the wall he saw faces, hunger-ravaged faces pressed against the fences, hands stretched out begging, barefoot children in the middle of winter, old men sitting on the curb waiting to die. And he also saw German soldiers laughing. One shoved an elderly Jewish man to the ground and forced him to do push-ups until he collapsed. The others applauded. The truck driver laughed with them. Martin said nothing. he simply looked away. That night he could not sleep. The image of the old man, the laughter, his own silence, all of it spun endlessly in his mind. It was then that he began to keep a private diary. He wrote in secret, in his room, with the door closed. He did not write about logistics or military orders. He wrote about what he saw, about what he felt, about what he could not say out loud. In January 1941, he noted, "Passed by the ghetto again. The children have the faces of old men. There are bodies in the streets, and no one collects them. How have we allowed this to happen?" In July 1942, during the mass deportations, he wrote, "Today I saw trains, cattle cars filled with people, without water or food. They say they are being sent to work in the East, but terrible rumors are circulating about camps and gas chambers. I do not want to believe it. I cannot believe it. And yet I know that something monstrous is happening, and I am doing nothing to stop it." In October 1943, after the total destruction of the ghetto, he wrote, "The ghetto no longer exists. They burned everything. They killed everyone. I can no longer pretend ignorance or say that I was only following orders. I have seen too much. I have been silent too long. God forgive me. But I believe we have already lost. Not the war. Something far more important. We have lost our humanity." Martin did not become a saboteur. He did not join the resistance or desert. He continued to perform his duties, but he began to do small things that almost no one noticed. He left forgotten boxes of food where he knew Polish workers would find them. He gave advance warning of raids. He allowed early departures before curfew. He signed false permits. He looked the other way when he saw food smuggling. He did not do it out of heroism, nor because he believed he was changing the world. He did it because he needed to look at himself in the mirror every morning. Because he needed to feel that there was still something human left inside him. In August 1944, during the city uprising, he was assigned to interrogate Polish prisoners. He saw how other officers treated them: beatings, torture, executions. Lieutenant Weber, an SS officer barely 24 years old, took pleasure in inflicting pain. Martin watched him rip the fingernails from a prisoner with pliers while laughing. He refused to participate. He insisted that detainees be treated in accordance with the Geneva Conventions. His superiors looked at him with suspicion, but they could accuse him of nothing concrete. Weber called him soft, said Martin was too sentimental, that he did not understand what real war was. Weber had grown up inside the regime and knew nothing else. To him, Slavs were subhuman, Jews a plague, and Germans who helped them deserved to die. By December 1944, Martin knew everything was over. The Soviet army was less than 30 kilometers away. Retreat was inevitable. It was a matter of weeks, perhaps days. His task now was to inspect the last usable buildings before the final evacuation. It was during one of those inspections, on December 12, 1944, while pursuing a German deserter, that he heard a violin among the ruins, found Maja, and understood that he had already looked away too many times in his life. Over the next 2 weeks, he returned to the basement 5 times. Each visit was a calculated risk. Each one could have been the last. First visit, December 14th. Martin returned 2 days after their first encounter. This time he did not come empty-handed. He brought black bread, a jar of preserved food, and 2 apples he had saved from his own ration. He put everything into a cloth bag and walked to the building on Ogrodowa Street. He pushed open the basement door and went inside. Maya was still there, curled up in the same corner. When she saw him, her body stiffened instantly. She expected death. She expected a trap. She expected betrayal. "I'm not going to hurt you," Martin said in German. Then he repeated it in clumsy Polish. "I won't hurt you." He set the bag down on the floor near the entrance. Then he took out the blank documents he had stolen from the administrative office. In a low voice, he explained that in 2 weeks, the last Polish workers would be evacuated and that he could get her out. But he needed a name. A false one. Maya didn't answer right away. She couldn't understand why a German soldier would do something like this. She thought it might be a trap, a cruel game. "You have 2 options," Martin continued. "Stay here and die when these buildings collapse or when the Soviets arrive, or try to leave with the evacuees. It's dangerous, but it's a chance." "Why?" she whispered. Martin had no clear answer, only exhaustion, accumulated guilt, and a desperate need to do at least one thing right. "What's your name?" "Maya." "Last name?" "Rosenfeld." "You need another one, a Polish one." Maya thought for a few seconds. She remembered the family who had hidden her some time before. "Anna Kowalska." Martin nodded and began filling out the forms. Maya didn't touch the food for hours after he left. She thought it might be poisoned. In the end, hunger won. She ate slowly, waiting for pain that never came. Second visit, December 17th. 3 days later, Martin returned. This time he brought more bread, a piece of hard cheese, and clothes. A worn gray dress, a wool coat, and a pair of shoes that weren't her size but would do. "You have to look like a Polish worker," he said. Maya looked at what she was wearing. Dirty rags she hadn't taken off in months. She took the dress with trembling hands. Martin turned away to give her privacy. The dress hung loose on her wasted body, but it was clean. The coat smelled of mothballs and old wool. "Your name is Anna Kowalska," Martin began. "You were born in Praga, a district of Warsaw. You worked in a munitions factory on Targowa Street. Your parents died during the uprising. You have no family. You have nothing." Maya repeated each sentence in a low voice, memorizing it. Her life depended on remembering that lie without a single mistake. Then Martin took out something unexpected, a small broken mirror. Maya looked at herself for the first time in months and barely recognized what she saw. Sunken face, dull eyes, short, unkempt hair. She looked much older than she was. "It's better this way," Martin said. "No one will be looking for a young violinist with a face like that." It was cruel, but it was true. Third visit, December 20th. When Martin returned 3 days later, he brought bad news. "There's a problem. Lieutenant Weber is suspicious. He's noticed that I leave often. He asked me where I go." Maya felt the ground open beneath her feet. "Will he follow you?" "Maybe. I'll have to be more careful. I'll come less often." He left more food and also a printed document with precise evacuation instructions. Meeting place, exact time, what to bring, what not to bring. "Memorize this. Then it has to be burned. There can be no trace." Maya read it in the dim light filtering through a crack in the ceiling. 3 times. Then Martin burned it with a match. The ashes disappeared into the darkness. Before leaving, he stopped at the door. "If something goes wrong, if I'm arrested or can't be there on evacuation day, go anyway. The documents are real. They'll work even without me. If they ask about you, say that Officer Martin Hoffman checked your papers a week ago. You never saw me after that." Maya nodded. When he left, for the first time she felt there might truly be a chance to survive. Fourth visit, December 23rd. The fourth visit was the most dangerous. Martin arrived late at night, agitated. "Weber followed me today. I had to take a 2-kilometer detour to lose him. I can't come back here again." If he discovers this place, we're dead. Both of us. He brought the final documents, all stamped and signed. He also left something Maya hadn't expected, a small kitchen knife. If someone tries to stop you during the evacuation, if everything goes wrong, don't surrender without a fight. Maya took the knife. It was small, almost useless, but it was something. Tomorrow is the evacuation. Be at Krasinski Square at 7, second truck. I'll be there to make sure they don't examine your papers too closely. He paused and looked at her intently. If there are too many checks, if Baber is there, don't insist. Come back here. The Soviets will arrive soon. 1 or 2 weeks. You can wait. And you? Maya asked. Martin didn't answer. They both knew the answer. 5th visit, December 24th. The 5th visit should never have happened. Martin arrived very early on the day of the evacuation. He brought more food than usual and a thermos of hot soup. He also carried a letter. It wasn't for her. It was for his wife, Anna, in Germany. He showed it to her for just a second, without handing it over. He wanted her to see his full name, Martin Hoffmann, Kassel. If you survive and ever need anything, look for me or for my family. For the first time in weeks, Maya spoke more than a few words. Why are you doing this? Why risk everything for me? Martin was silent, then answered in a drained voice. Because I need to believe I can still do something good. Because I wear this uniform, but I don't want to be what it represents. And because if I survive, I want to look my children in the eyes and tell them that at least once I tried to do the right thing. He paused. My daughter Gerda was 14 when I left. She played the violin. When I heard you here among the ruins, for a moment I could believe the world still had beauty. It was the most intimate confession he had made in years. We leave in 3 hours. At 7. I'll be there. Maya nodded. Martin stood up and already at the door stopped without turning around. If we ever meet again, I'd like to hear you play once more. Not here. On a real stage. With light. With people. With life. He left, and it was just then, as he climbed the basement stairs, that he heard boots. He wasn't alone. Martin drew his pistol and moved forward slowly. When he reached the first floor, he saw the silhouette. It was Lieutenant Otto Weber wearing a cold smile. Officer Hoffmann, he said slowly. How curious to find you here so early, all alone on Christmas Eve. Martin's blood ran cold. Officer Hoffmann, Weber repeated, and with company no less. He looked at Maya with contempt, then back at Martin. Do you know the punishment for helping Jews? She's not Jewish, Martin replied firmly. She's a Polish worker, Anna Kowalska. I was checking her documents for the evacuation. Checking papers in a dark basement alone with food under your arm? Weber laughed. Do you think I'm an idiot? He stepped closer to Maya and examined her coldly. Show me your hands. She extended them, trembling. Weber studied them carefully. These are not the hands of someone who worked in munitions. These are the hands of a pianist or a violinist. His gaze slid to the violin in the corner, and he smiled. There's a simple way to settle this, Weber continued. If she's really Polish, she'll know the Lord's Prayer in Polish. Recite it. The basement fell into absolute silence. Maya did know it. Her Polish protectors had taught it to her precisely for a moment like this. But her mind went blank. Terror froze her. She began to recite in a broken voice, barely a thread of sound. Louder, Weber ordered. Maya tried to continue, but Weber cut her off immediately. Enough! That accent is awful. She's Jewish. He raised his pistol and aimed it at Maya. Wait, Martin said. You, Officer Hoffman, are under arrest for treason against the Reich, Weber replied. Aiding Jews, falsifying documents, endangering the security of the German army. Without taking the gun off Maya, Weber pulled a pair of handcuffs from his belt. Hands behind your back, he ordered. Martin didn't move. His mind searched for exits, and everyone ended the same way. His death, hers, or both. And yet there was one option. One desperate option. Martin raised his own pistol, not at Maya, at Weber. Lower your weapon, Lieutenant. Weber let out a short laugh. Are you pointing a gun at me? At a superior SS officer? This is better than I imagined. Not just treason. Now mutiny as well. Lower your weapon, Martin repeated. His voice was calm, but there was something final in it, something Weber sensed. For a moment, the two men aimed at each other in the dark basement. Maya, frozen in her corner, was a silent witness to what seemed inevitable. If you shoot me, Weber said calmly, you become a murderer and a deserter. You'll never see your family again. Is this Jew's life really worth that much? Martin didn't answer. He didn't lower the gun either. Weber calculated. He was younger, faster, but Martin already had him lined up. If Weber tried to shoot first, they might both die. Finally, Weber spoke. A deal. You lower your weapon. I let the woman go and arrest only you, court-martial, maybe prison, perhaps not execution. A lie, Martin said. Probably, Weber admitted. But your family won't know you died for a Jew. I can fix the report. I'll say you died in combat. They'll get a pension. Your children will believe you were a hero. It was a cruel offer, but a practical one. Die as a traitor, staining his family forever, or die honorably in the eyes of the world, even if he knew the truth. And her? Martin asked. You have my word as an officer. I let her go. Your word is worth nothing. Then there's no deal. The silence stretched. 30 seconds. A minute. Maya barely breathed. At last, Martin lowered his pistol slightly. Let her go first. No. Then there's no deal. Weber growled, frustrated, and lowered his gun, pointing it at the floor. Go, he told Maya. She didn't move at once. She looked at Martin. Her eyes held too much to fit into words. Gratitude, guilt, the horror of knowing someone was about to die for her. Go, Martin repeated, softer. Live. That's all that matters. Maya grabbed the violin, passed by Weber, who watched her with disgust, ran up the stairs, and out of the building. She ran through the ruins without looking back. When she was gone, Weber raised his pistol again, now at Martin. Hands behind your back. Martin obeyed. Weber cuffed him, tightening the metal until it bit into his skin. Do you know what's most pathetic? Weber said, shoving him toward the exit. She'll probably die anyway. Hunger, cold, collapsing buildings. You lost everything for nothing. Maybe, Martin replied, but at least I tried. Weber took him to headquarters. The court-martial lasted 40 minutes. There was no defense. The charges were clear. Treason, falsification of documents, attempted aid to a racial enemy of the Reich. The sentence came without delay. Death by firing squad. The execution was set for dawn on December 22, 1944. Martin spent his final 24 hours in an icy cell. He was allowed to write one last letter to his family. He didn't mention Maya. He didn't explain the real reason. He wrote only, I tried to be a good man in impossible times. Forgive me for not being there. Take care of one another. The morning of December 22nd was gray and cutting, below freezing. Martin was taken to the rear courtyard of the barracks. 6 soldiers formed the firing squad. Weber supervised in person. Any last words? Martin looked at the dull sky and thought of Anna, of his 3 children, of the 27 years he had been a teacher, of books, of the small things that made life worth living. And he thought of Maya, of that violin sounding among the ruins, of the last beauty he had heard before the end. None, he said at last. Prepare, Weber ordered. The rifles were raised. Aim. Martin closed his eyes, not out of fear, but out of a strange calm. Fire. The shots echoed in the empty courtyard. Martin's body fell onto the dirty snow. He was 45 years old. He had survived 1 world war only to die in another. Not as a hero, not as a villain, but as a man who tried to do the right thing at the wrong moment. Weber ordered him buried in an unnamed mass grave. The official report would state that he died fighting Polish saboteurs. His family would receive the pension. His children would never know the truth. Weber believed he had won. He had eliminated a traitor and was certain the Jew would die anyway. He was wrong. Maya escaped and ran west. She found shelter in the ruins of a burned church. For 4 days she hid there, eating what Martin had left her. She waited for December 24th, 1944, Christmas Eve. The last 3 evacuation trucks left Krakow heading west. They carried the final Polish workers and a few wounded soldiers. Maya watched from the shadows. She saw them load people, check documents. Martin wasn't there, just as he had promised. She didn't know why, but she feared the worst. Still, she had the papers in her pocket, the false name memorized, the story learned down to every detail. When the second truck was almost full, Maya stepped out of the shadows. She walked steadily, without hesitation, as if she belonged there. She handed her documents to a bored sergeant who barely glanced at them. Anna Kowalska, munitions factory, she said clearly. He checked the stamps. Everything looked perfect. The signature was authentic. He nodded. Get in. Maya climbed onto the truck and sat among other Polish women. No one spoke to her. No one looked at her twice. She was just another person trying to escape the ruins. The trucks departed at dusk. Maya looked one last time toward the destroyed city, toward the basement where a German soldier had decided her life was worth something. She didn't know Martin had died 2 days earlier. She didn't know he had been executed for helping her. She would learn much later. They traveled west for 3 days, passing shattered towns, columns of refugees, and retreating German soldiers who already understood that everything was lost. On December 27th, they arrived at a refugee camp near Łódź. There, the Polish workers were registered and assigned barracks. Maya, now officially Anna Kowalska, received a ration card and a shared bed with other women. 2 weeks later, on January 17, 1945, the Soviet army entered Krakow, an empty city, a dead city, a city the Germans had tried to erase. Maya did not return. There was nothing to return to. She stayed in the camp until March 1945. Then, when restrictions eased, she traveled west, to France, to a new life under a borrowed name. For years, she remained Anna Kowalska. She worked in factories, cleaned houses, played the violin on the street for coins. She didn't speak of the ghetto, of the months among ruins, or of the German officer who had saved her. It was too painful, too impossible to explain. How do you say that a man wearing the uniform of those who destroyed your world was also the reason you were still breathing? In 1950, she emigrated to the United States and settled in New York. In time, she began using her real name again, Maya Lewin. She played in small community orchestras and gave violin lessons to children. She lived in a modest apartment in the Bronx, a quiet life, an invisible life. But in 1961, during the trial of Adolf Eichmann in Jerusalem, something stirred inside her. She watched the testimonies on television. She saw the world finally listening. She saw other stories emerge from the shadows and decided that hers, too, had to exist out loud. She wrote a testimony for the Holocaust archives. She described how she survived, how a German officer falsified documents to save her, and she gave his name, Martin Köhler. For years, nothing happened. The text remained archived, one among millions. In 1973, a German researcher named Heinrich Müller was reviewing declassified military files, searching for cases of Germans who had helped Jews. He found Martin Köhler's file. He found the official report stating that Köhler had died in combat, but also a confidential SS document. Otto Weber had documented everything: the treason, the falsification, the attempt to save a Jewish woman, and the execution by firing squad on December 22, 1944. Müller contacted the Holocaust Archive and requested related testimonies. Maya's was sent to him. The pieces fit. Müller traveled to Kassel and found Martin's widow, Anna, now 72. He showed her Maya's testimony and the SS report. For the first time, Anna learned how her husband had really died. Not in combat, as she had been told. He was executed as a traitor for saving a Jew. Anna cried for days, but it wasn't only grief, it was pride. Her husband had been a good man. He had done the right thing and paid the highest price. In 1975, Anna traveled to New York. There the two women met, two elderly women marked by war. They embraced in the small Bronx apartment. "Your husband saved my life," Maya said. "He would have wanted you to survive," Anna replied, "and he would have wanted the music to continue." Anna showed her Martin's diary, the pages that had survived. Maya read them through tears. She saw his doubts, his shame, his decision to do something human in the middle of hell, and she understood the true cost of that choice. In 1976, Maya submitted the formal request for Martin Köhler to be recognized as righteous among the nations. She included her testimony, the SS report, and the diary. This time it was approved. On April 19, 1977, exactly 34 years after the Ghetto Uprising, Martin Köhler was posthumously recognized as righteous among the nations. His name was engraved in the Garden of the Righteous in Jerusalem. Martin's daughter Gerda, now 51, traveled to Israel to receive the medal. Maya was there. She was 60 years old. She brought her violin. After the ceremony, they asked her to play. She agreed and played the same piece by Vivaldi that she had performed in the basement on the day Martin first found her. When she finished, the room fell into absolute silence. Then came the tears, many of them. Because everyone understood that the music was more than music. It was proof that even in the worst hell, a human being can choose kindness and sacrifice everything for a life the world insists on despising. Maya Lewin died on April 3, 1998, in New York. She was 81 years old. She was buried with her violin. On her gravestone, a simple, exact sentence was engraved. She played so as not to disappear, and she did not disappear. Martin Köhler, by contrast, was buried in an unnamed mass grave near Warsaw. There is no tomb, no monument, only a number lost in an archive in Berlin. But his name is carved in stone in Jerusalem. It is in the Holocaust archives. It lives in the memory of those who know this story. And as long as someone remembers it, Martin Köhler will not have died in vain. Because this is not a story about heroes. Heroes are usually exceptional figures who do extraordinary things. This is the story of an ordinary person who, in extreme circumstances, chose to do what was right when the easiest and safest thing would have been to look away. He did not save thousands. He did not change the course of the war. He did not stop trains or open camps. He saved one person. But for that person, it was everything. In December 1944, among the ruins of a destroyed city, a German soldier heard a violin and decided that the music, that life, that woman still mattered. He decided that saving a life was worth more than saving himself. He paid for that decision with his own life. He was executed as a traitor. He died without knowing whether Maja had survived. He died without knowing whether his sacrifice had meant anything. But it did mean something, because Maya lived. And by living, she testified. And by testifying, she preserved his name. And because his name was preserved, the world learned that even in the deepest darkness, there can be light. Evil doesn't require monsters. It's enough to have ordinary people who look away, who say, "It's not my problem," who say, "I'm just following orders," who ask, "What can I do?" Good doesn't require saints either. It only requires ordinary people who decide not to avert their gaze, who say, "This is wrong," who understand they can do something, even something small, and who accept that a single life can be worth more than their own safety. Martin Köhler was a normal man, a teacher, a father, a husband. He was not perfect. He wore the uniform of an army that committed atrocities. He witnessed crimes and for years did not stop them. He was complicit through his silence. But in the end, when it truly mattered, when a life depended on his choice, he chose correctly. He chose to see a human being when the world demanded he see an enemy. He chose compassion when the system demanded cruelty. He chose sacrifice when survival would have been easier. That choice, that instant, that act, did not erase all the darkness. It did not save everyone. But for a woman named Maya Lewin, it was everything. Somewhere beneath the rubble of Warsaw, in a forgotten basement, the echo of a violin still resonates. Not in any literal way, but in memory, in the stories passed down, in the lessons that remain. And as long as that echo stays alive, as long as this story continues to be told, perhaps, just perhaps, the next person who faces the decision to look away or do what is right will remember a German schoolteacher turned soldier who heard a violin among ruins and decided that a life still mattered, even if it cost him his own, especially because it cost him his own.